Committee members, if you could take your places, we will call the meeting to order. And the clerk has advised me that we do have a quorum and the witnesses are all available. Welcome to meeting number 31 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting again is taking place in a hybrid format, and I would anticipate all those attending in person to follow health procedures that are in place at the time. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would ask that all questions and interventions be directed through me as chair. And for those appearing virtually, you have the option of using the official language of your choice. And if interpretation stops, please get my attention. We'll suspend until it's corrected. I would also ask those members, while speaking, to speak slowly for the benefit of the interpreters so they can clearly capture what you're saying. As well, those appearing virtually, you can select translation services by using the icon at the bottom of your surface. As well, use the raise hand emblem to get my attention. Before I begin to introduce the witnesses, I do want to clarify for the benefit of the committee, at our last meeting we had an agreement that all witnesses would speak for 4 minutes, and then we would go into a full round of questioning. So is that still the will of the committee? Sensing unanimity, then, Madam Clerk, we have the agreement because the committee adopted at our forming meeting 5 minutes, so we have to deal with that. So thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February the 3rd, 2022, the committee will resume its study of the Housing Accelerator Fund. I would like to welcome our witnesses to begin our discussions, and as indicated, they will have 4 minutes of opening remarks followed by questions. From the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, Celeste Hayward. The Designatable Environments Incorporated, Tia Cordy, President, Kanata Bar Indian Band, Patrick Mitchell, Chief, Rena, Gary Gladstone, Head of Stakeholder Relations, who is in the room with us, and I understand he has to leave around 12:30. Oh, well, thank you. From the Squamish Nation, we have Sarah Silva, Chief Executive Officer, Housing Society, and from the Women's National Housing and Homeless Network, Carolyn Witzman, Advisory Board Member. We will start with the Aboriginal Housing Management Association for 4 minutes. Ms. Hayward, you have the floor.
Good morning, and thank you for having me today. My name is Celeste Hayward, and I'm coming from the Aboriginal Housing Management Association in British Columbia. So the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, which we call HUMA, has 25 years of expertise in advancing housing rights for Indigenous people in urban, rural, and northern communities. HUMA is comprised of about 55 Indigenous housing and service providers located across British Columbia off-reserve. They manage 95% of all Indigenous housing units located off-reserve. We administer funds in partnership with BC Housing for 5,521 units for Indigenous families, and we are in development with 2,133. So we will have over 7,000 units in 1 year. The programs and services that HUMA members provide include affordable housing units, housing shelters, transition homes, supportive housing, and assisted living facilities, including complex care. Many of HUMA's members also offer support services that include homeless prevention, parenting skills, mental health programs, and substance use support. In terms of scale, HUMA members make up over 1/3 of Indigenous housing providers in Canada. HUMA works with members and providers to reclaim self-determination through culturally appropriate or culturally supported housing that honors Indigenous traditions in meaningful ways. It's very important to connect to the sense of belonging and way of knowing. This is critical for the 80% of the Indigenous populations who live in urban, rural, and northern living situations without the financial or cultural support at times from their nation, and who are heavily impacted by inequity, racism, colonial oppression, and generational trauma. By treating those in need as rights holders and experts on what is required for cultural safety and dignified life and culturally supported housing, CMHC can uphold the human rights of urban Indigenous families, which include the right to housing. As Canada's leading Indigenous housing expert, HUMA welcomes the federal government's commitment to grow the affordable housing supply in Canada's largest cities every year through the $4 billion Housing Accelerator Fund. When implementing the fund, it is critical that the unique needs of urban Indigenous people are considered, including deeper commitments to cultural safety, culturally supported housing, and supportive wraparound services. In recognition of the ongoing injustices in Canada's violent treatment of Indigenous people, HUMA calls on the federal government and the CMHC to ensure HAF, the Housing Accelerator Fund, specifically addresses intersectionality affordability issues, as the CMHC has recognized Indigenous households and those led by women, especially single mothers, are most likely to be in core housing need. Racialized 2SL LGBTQAI plus and new migrant households, as well as people with disabilities, are also experiencing disproportionate rates of housing needs and homelessness. So we specifically call on the administrators of the Housing Accelerator Fund to prioritize projects in partnership with Indigenous organizations, prioritize projects with clear objectives to address the core housing needs, address the barriers HUMA members are reporting with high-cost development fees to begin building, reconcile with Indigenous people through the Federal Lands Initiative by taking special consideration to allocate those properties back to the local Indigenous communities where those properties are located, ensure the Accelerator Fund helps make it mandatory for municipalities to include urban Indigenous housing needs in their housing plans and OCP, and I think balance the need for affordable housing with the need for culturally supported housing and the additional needs of Indigenous people in Canada. Only through meaningful engagement with HUMA and urban Indigenous housing and service partners across Canada can the social, economic, and Indigenous rights of urban, rural, and northern Indigenous peoples in Canada be claimed and protected. I don't think that's my full 4 minutes, but that's all I have to say so far. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Hayward, and yes, it was. Thank you. Now to the Designable Environments Incorporated, Tia Kurdi, you have the floor. Tia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Kurdi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry. I was having some difficulty with the microphone for a second there. Thank you. My name is Thea Curdy. I'm an affiliate member of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, IAAP certified accessible built environment professional, a board member of the Universal Design Network of Canada, and the president of Designable Environments, a 35-year-old business, one of Canada's oldest accessible built environment consulting firms. I'm also a person with several invisible disabilities. Many Canadians don't know our current building code mostly exempts housing from accessibility requirements. And sadly, what little there is, even in the latest version, does not create usable, accessible homes. This violates our 2010 commitments to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So for decades, disabled Canadians of all kinds and their families have been left with an avoidable, accessible housing crisis. It hurts our healthcare and social services. It also is discrimination, and discrimination against our largest minority group, the 22+%, or over 7 million of us currently living with disabilities. How did this happen? 40 years ago, we did change our Canadian Charter and Human Rights Code to say that disabled people are equal citizens and buildings and places shall not discriminate against them. But we failed to fix both design and construction education and the building code. Legislation, policy, and standards were not aligned. This new Housing Accelerator Fund can't make this mistake. This also happened because of what too many non-disabled people, often the gatekeepers for access, think. They sometimes claim that accessibility is more work or special design. Access and accommodation can be explained as burdens or extras. But current designs have been cutting corners actually on human needs, so our designs are incomplete. 100% of us benefit from accommodations because disability isn't rare, but part of being human. Every one of us are born with or get temporary, situational, or long-term disabilities due to illness, accident, or aging. And demographics are changing. Over 1,000 Canadians a day are turning 65. Universal design is better for everyone. This Housing Accelerator Fund is an investment in our future, and no government money should ever again be spent on creating new barriers. Access to housing for disabled people of all kinds is not a gift, charity, bonus, or an extra. It's actually smarter, more responsible, and sustainable design. This funding should require #inclusive from the start, as promoted last week in the 2022 National Accessibility Week. I recommend a full 100% of all qualifying housing to be visitable and adaptable using well-known, decades-old universal design, CSA, and CMHC guidelines. Every home created to be welcoming and affordable to adapt to unique accessibility needs. 100% also prevents isolation, supporting mental health services, diversity, inclusion, and sustainable design goals. 100% makes it easier to implement. We already have the technical details we need to right size and cost designs. 70% of those requirements actually cost nothing, like pick a different color for something, install it at a different height, choose a different door hardware, etc. Elements that do cost something cost less to build in than fix later. In fact, a 2018 WHO study showed it's 22 times more expensive to fix inaccessible housing than to design inclusion from the start. 100% is fiscally responsible, especially as our disabled population are disproportionately poor and retired folks lived on fixed incomes, as do many others. Other benefits of funding 100% visitable and adaptable design include: 1, it helps create the accessible Canada that we talk about in the Act. 2, it allows for age in place. 3, people with disabilities able to choose any available house they can afford, not have to wait for what small percentage was actually built for them. 4, it allows disabled kids, think at Halloween, for example, and adults to visit any neighbor, friend, or family. And 5, people who get new disabilities can stay living in homes and neighborhoods they love without expensive renovations for as long as they want or can. Thank you very much.
Ms. Curdy. Now to Mr. Michel for 5 minutes, or for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Chief Patrick Michal of the Kanakabar Indian Band. Located on Highway 1, Kanakabar is 14 kilometers south of Lytton, BC, and 2.5 hours north of Vancouver, BC. Kanakabar is considered rural remote and has recently completed 10 new shelter units, started construction of 24 new shelter units, and another 8 new resilient units are in the final planning stages. On May 27, 2022, Kanakabar hosted a live and virtual event which we called The Results Are In, where Kanakabar introduced the Fraser Canyon region's owners and tenants of homes and businesses, municipalities, TNRD, are the Thompson-Nicola Regional District representatives, and First Nations leadership and membership to 5 building envelopes that have met Kanakabar's community resiliency housing criteria, which is affordable, resilient to heat, fire, wind, rain, and cold, energy efficient, and durable. On May 27th, Kanakabar also did a ribbon cutting ceremony for the ground clearing and site servicing works for the 4 new duplexes to be located on our reserve lands. Once completed, these new duplexes provide much needed affordable housing for our region, while also showcasing what the homes of tomorrow look like today. A team of architects and engineers are now tasked with the production of sealed design drawings and costing, and once those are in, construction on the 8 new shelter units can begin. One envelope, AAC, and in addition to meeting Kanakabar's criteria above, can create new meaningful, well-paying Canadian jobs in manufacturing, warehousing, storage, and construction for both new builds and resiliency retrofitting, with surplus AAC also available for the export market. Kanakabar's goal is not a new, resilient, and sustainable economy. That's a bit big for us. Kanaka simply wishes to build homes and retrofit our existing homes and businesses with supporting infrastructure that we can live, work, and play in, shelter in place that during extreme weather events and after the event has passed, repair, restore the systems that give Kanakabar membership today and our future generations quality of life. Housing Accelerator Fund. What Kanakabar is doing is both scalable and replicable anywhere in Canada. So Kanakabar's learnings can help Canadians anywhere, be they urban, rural, mountain, northern, coastal, or prairie. If one changes the current entrenched, embedded, proactive system of feasible business case planning, permitting, design, construction, and then operating to one that sees proven builds and systems replicated where it's wanted, Canada can complete the builds and give Canadians hope in these ever-darkening times. Delay otherwise equates to cost increases and affordability may be lost. Where do the build occurs? COVID-19 has certainly seen a transition of urban into rural. The Fraser Canyon region currently has Crown parcels, Indian Reserve lands, municipal and regional fee simple service properties, many not in use, most of which can be acquired quickly for very reasonable prices. Kanakabar has acquired 5 fee simple lands in a very short time frame. Kanaka is currently in discussion with the owners of 2 more properties, and all the remaining owners in our region are aware that Kanakabar will speak to them about sale if their price point is assessed value. Kanaka simply will not pay a premium for lands off reserve. We will not support speculation. I'm not sure about ownership of either the land or house under the Housing Accelerator Fund, which seems predicated on build and sale to Canadians. Kanaka's model is communal and inclusive housing based on tenancy rather than ownership or lease, which creates both exclusions and inequity. Kanakabar has established provincially incorporated companies and societies that help develop and manage housing off reserve. With awareness of affordable and resilient options on alternatives for new builds and renovation and retrofits, Canadians can have a safe place for the next 100 years too. It is by working together to prevent, design, and then build safe, resilient, and affordable housing that Canadians will be able to live through the growing frequency, duration, and intensity of extreme weather events. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Michelle, now to Mr. Gladstone, who's in the room with us for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and honorable members. Good morning. My name is Gary Gladstone, and I'm the lead stakeholder relations of RENA, as well as the convener of the Intentional Community Consortium. RENA, celebrating our 50th anniversary next year, promotes dignity, individuality, independence, personal growth, and community inclusion for people with diverse abilities within a framework of Jewish culture and values. Open to all, RENA provides supportive housing, programming, and employment services to over 1,000 individuals with developmental disabilities, including autism and those with mental health challenges. The Intentional Community Consortium represents 26 agencies that are advocating for and building not-for-profit, deeply affordable housing for the most vulnerable in society, those with developmental disabilities. On behalf of those we support, I extend a huge thank you to the Government of Canada for listening to our appeal when I last appeared before HUMA in February 2017 to ensure that funds were allocated to those with developmental disabilities in any housing funding. When the National Housing Strategy was released in 2017, it allocated funds for at least 2,400 units with supports. To date, over 700 have been built and occupied. More must be done, and all levels of government must be at the table, but thank you, HUMA. Gladys is a middle-aged woman, and Anthony is her adult son. Both have developmental disabilities, and both have been on a housing waiting list in York Region for years. Both Gladys and Anthony lived separately in the shelter system, receiving community supports. They then moved together into an apartment. Due to their complex needs and lack of understanding of suitable accommodations by their landlord and other tenants, they were about to be evicted. As a result of the National Housing Strategy, and with the support of Ontario, York Region, and Vaughan, the Lou Fruitman RENA residence, RENA's second intentional community residence, which will be home to 136 residents, with diverse needs opened in 2021, and Gladys and Anthony now live there. Because all levels of government work together to assist the most vulnerable, rather than being separated and experiencing homelessness, I'm proud to report that they have been living there together with the right supports to thrive for the past number of months. More must be done, I'll repeat, with all levels of government so that there can be more success stories. Housing is a key social determinant of health and well-being. Housing is a fundamental right for all persons, including those with developmental disabilities. One size does not fit all. There is a wide range of needs, which demands a wide range of options. 100,000 Ontario adults have an intellectual disability. An estimated 40% or 40,000 have a concurrent mental health diagnosis. At least 16,000 individuals with developmental disabilities are awaiting housing support across Ontario. Their projected wait time, 40 years. At least 300 individuals are wrongfully placed in hospital shelters, long-term care facilities, alternative level of care. 18 to 30% of those in homeless shelters have developmental disabilities. In order to expand housing for those with developmental disabilities, on behalf of those we support, I would ask the following. Number one, in order for a lower tier level of government to access funds from the Housing Accelerator Fund, they must agree to allocate at least 10% of their housing funds to support this vulnerable community. Number two, the largest impediment to building more units is the expense and scarcity of lands. CMHC must modify their funding to permit not-for-profit agencies to use CMHC funds to purchase land for deeply affordable housing. In Ontario, those on ODSP can only spend a maximum $497 per month on rent. Average, is well over $1,000. And number three, additional federally owned properties must be made available to build deeply affordable housing, specifically for those with developmental disabilities. A nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members, said Mahatma Gandhi. Through the proposed Housing Accelerator Fund, you can ensure that Canada takes care of those who cannot advocate for themselves. Gladys and Anthony were homeless, were in unsuitable housing, were about to be evicted, and now are thriving in appropriate accommodations because the National Housing Strategy ensured there were funds targeted to this most vulnerable community. Now, with your support, we need to ensure that those with developmental disabilities are never left behind again, and that 10% of funds are dedicated to assist them. Further information on RENA, please check out the website at rena.org, and thank you very much for your time.
Sharing a real-life story. Very compelling. Now from the Squamish Nation, Sarah Silva. You have 4 minutes.
Hot Squall. My name is Sarah Silva. I'm a member of the Squamish Nation. I am also the CEO of HUMA Housing Society. Just a little bit about the Squamish Nation. We are located in British Columbia, in Vancouver and Squamish, BC. And our traditional territory expands all the way to Whistler and Vancouver as well. Squamish Nation is the second largest nation in BC. We have approximately 4,000 members, and half of them live outside of our community. Most of the reserves in North Vancouver and in Vancouver area are now overcrowded. And unfortunately, because of the housing crisis, many of our members are being forced to live outside of our community and more into rural areas. And of course, the cost of rent is causing all sorts of different issues within our community, being that, of course, they cannot live within the community or in the traditional territory, but they don't have a lot of money left over to spend on things like hydro and education and food. And so our Squamish Nation Council, approximately 2 years ago, set a bold initiative to bring all of our Squamish Nation members home within a generation. And we define a generation of 25 years. Housing is our people's number one priority as the cost of living continues to rise in our historical traditional territory. And it's even more important than ever to bring our people home and have a range of different options within our community. Again, HUMA Housing Society is a not-for-profit organization, and we are responsible not only for building and managing affordable housing for our community. Currently, we've got 3 projects in the works. We have 2 projects that are funded under the CMHC Rapid Housing Initiative, and we also have one that's funded through BC Housing under the Community Housing Fund. And all of our current projects are very needed, but they all have culturally appropriate design and also supports as well. Again, we have a lot of poor living conditions and overcrowded homes that are very present in our community. And we have elders and families and young children living in condemned homes that unfortunately have issues such as mold. And this is having a negative effect on our children's well-being, as lack of affordable and culturally safe housing has had harmful outcomes on health and educational outcomes. And and again, there hasn't been, because of the high cost of rents, there isn't a lot of money left over for other essential needs such as food and heat. We also have a lot of our members that are living outside of the community facing undignified living conditions as well, and a lot of landlords that are not, unfortunately, not treating them appropriately, and they're facing a lot of different barriers outside of the community. So there's a real drive for us to bring our community members home. So we hope that as this new fund is being created, that taking into consideration that each First Nation has their own diverse needs, and for the Squamish Nation, our desire is to bring our communities home. Our desire is to have them within culturally appropriate housing and be able to go to our schools and practice culture and have that deep connection to our land and our territory and our families. And for us, we face our own barriers within our community. We are under the Indian Act, so there are a variety of different barriers that do exist under the Indian Act that a lot of other outside communities don't quite understand. What we are noticing with some of the CMHC funding that's coming out is a lot of the time as well that outside organizations or governments, they define affordability based on non-Indigenous communities. And so our communities, and we've done a lot of work, we have our own governance structure, we have our own internal processes, and we're doing a lot of our own data collection and on housing need and demand. But what we're realizing after looking at our data is that a lot of the other governments, the programming of their level of affordability is really for the outside communities and doesn't reflect the needs and the income levels of our community. So I hope that the funding would be flexible and allow for the First Nations to define their own levels of affordability. And again, we have our own.
If you could wrap up your opening comments.
Oh, sure.
Please.
Yes, and we hope that the programming again is flexible and we can have more funding for culturally safe, appropriate housing design and supports. So we can help heal our communities within our communities and help heal from the generations of trauma that we've had to go through with the residential schools. So thank you.
And I'm sure you'll have opportunity to expand on your points in the question period. Now to finish, we have Ms. Witzman for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Carolyn Weitzman, and I'm with the National Women's Housing and Homelessness Network. We welcome the federal government's commitment to grow the annual housing supply in the country's largest cities every year, creating a target of 100,000 new middle-class homes by 2026 through the $4 billion Housing Accelerator Fund confirmed in April's federal budget. We note that half is being administered by the CMHC under the rubric of the 2017 National Housing Strategy. This strategy commits the federal government to work with other levels of government using a human rights-based approach to lift 530,000 households living in unaffordable, overcrowded, or inadequate homes out of housing need by 2028 of approximately 1.7 million largely renter households identified as living in housing need, and eliminate chronic homelessness by 2030. The National Housing Strategy Act, adopted in 2019, further stipulates that the Government of Canada commits to implementing housing as a fundamental human right through its policies, programs, and budgetary decisions, including its spending power for housing programs in other jurisdictions. As the CMHC has recognized, households led by women and gender-diverse people, especially single mothers, are the most likely to be in core housing need. Indigenous, racialized, 2S, LGBTQ+, and new migrant households, as well as people with disabilities, also experience disproportionate rates of housing need and homelessness. Multiple evaluations have shown that the federal government's current housing programs will not adequately meet its targets of having the net number of tenant households in need or eliminating chronic homelessness. The average income for households in need is $23,000 a year, equating to a monthly maximum rent of $575 a month. And yet the vast majority of loans and grants under the NHS are now being provided to private sector developers without human rights due diligence and almost no gender and intersectional analysis of outcomes. The result has been a proliferation of homes, the majority of which are unaffordable to average income earners, with a minority of so-called short-term affordable homes that fail to address housing need across the country. But the Housing Accelerator Fund is an opportunity for the Government of Canada to reset. It can proactively put its commitments to the right to housing into action to address growing rates of housing need by working with municipalities to transform systems. To this end, we offer the following recommendations. First, design a housing accelerator fund using the Act's human rights framework and a gender and intersectional approach, a GBA plus approach. That includes defining affordable housing as homes costing no more than 30% of gross household income and ensure that those affordable units remain affordable in perpetuity. So HAF should adopt the CMHC's definition of affordable housing, which is housing that costs no more than 30% of gross household income. In addition, HAF should adhere to the CMHC's definition of core housing need, which includes housing that costs more than 30% of a household's before tax income to pay the median rent, including utility costs, of alternative local market housing that meets standards of affordability, overcrowding, and repair. HAF should define middle class as moderate income households, as well as allowing for housing subsidy for low income households to flow into those new homes. And again, I think this ties into what a few of the previous deputants were saying. The Housing Accelerator Fund is a reworking of the 1975 Federal Housing Action Plan, whose objective was to stimulate the residential construction industry to ensure an adequate supply of housing to meet the needs of low and moderate income households. Current research, and I'm part of that research, shows that the majority of households in need have very low incomes, less than 20% of their area median household income, or low incomes, 20 to 50% of median income, or moderate, a smaller number have moderate incomes, 50 to 80% of area median household income. As the CMHC has recognized, larger households led by women and gender-diverse people, and especially single mother-led families, are most likely to be in housing need, and that's particularly true for those that are Indigenous or racialized or 2S LGBTQ+, or newcomers or persons with disabilities. That's why the National Housing Strategy committed to allocating 33% of funding investments towards diverse households led by women. So HAF should prioritize scaling up moderate income homes at target rents of $1,000 to $1,800 per month, depending on the size of the home and the local market, or the local income, I should say, and then target Canada Housing Benefits to subsidize those new homes for very low and low-income groups, monitoring outcomes for NHS targets as well as sub-targets for women and gender-diverse people. Right. So, lifting adequately housed individuals and households can be done by stacking Rapid Housing Initiative, Co-Investment Fund, a reformed rental construction finance initiative, using nonprofit development, using government land, as my colleague Mr. Gladstone said, doing as-of-right approvals for nonprofit and affordable development, as the City of Victoria is now, prioritizing low-cost financing for low-cost homes, and large-scale development, including use of modular and wood frame techniques. I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Ms. Witzman, I'm sure you can expand during the question round on any point you did not make. Before we begin, I just, because we have 6 witnesses, if you would identify the witness you're directing the question to, it would save you time for your round. So we'll begin with Mr. Dalton for 6 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much to all the witnesses for sharing your testimony. And being from British Columbia, it's nice to hear from the Indigenous representatives here. And our Vice Chair, Member of Parliament Stephanie Kuzi, would have loved to have been here, but her flight was cancelled, so she's not here. So she's stranded and won't be here until tomorrow. So just Ms. Silver, just here with the Squamish Nation, just commend your people for the vision that you have. It's for your people, and I'm just wondering if you can just share a little bit about how is the rents, the cost of housing, how is that determined right now with the stock that you do have on the reserve? Is that band decisions? Just help us understand that, and then also just how extra supports, extra housing, how that comes into play. Can you expand a bit more on that, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The Squamish Nation only had one housing program for a really, really long time. And that was the single family homes that was funded through own source revenue and through ISK funding. And for the longest time, that was the only program. And those homes essentially are free, so nobody pays rent. And unfortunately, that's what caused a lot of the issues with housing in our community, such as the really, really long wait list. And also, we have lands in North Vancouver, different communities, but they're being built out, so there's not a lot of room to build single-family homes anymore. And so the Squamish Nation looked at different models of housing authorities and nonprofits that were being developed by First Nations throughout Canada and decided to go with the housing authority / nonprofit model. And the idea was to start developing higher density projects, so townhomes and mid-density and hopefully one day high-density homes in our more rural and urban settings. And so the idea was to separate housing governance from council, and we would have a board of directors now through our nonprofit that would manage a lot of, the strategic thinking, but also the operations as well, the society. And through that, we are able now to charge rents. And a lot of the time, the rents are defined by the program of housing and the funding that we receive. And so CMHC will say, or BC Housing will say, this is an affordable housing project, and you have to define it by, let's say, 30% less of market for North Vancouver, or 30% of less of market for Vancouver. But those rates are no way comparable to the income in our communities, even though we are, obviously in one of the most expensive places. Those affordable markers that CMHC uses are no way affordable. And so we have to look at other ways to subsidize those rents. And then you have other rents such as the shelter rate and 30% of market, or 30% of your income as well. And those ones are defined by the programs. They aren't defined by us. It would be great for us to be able to define affordability, but under the current housing programs, we don't have the ability.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Chief Patrick, I visited your lands a few years ago when I was an MLA and toured the Interjex project, and then had barbecue at the band office, and just appreciate the hospitality. Could you give me an idea what percentage of the Kanakabar, your people are on reserve as opposed to off reserve, and what is some of the housing needs for those off reserve? What is happening there with those members?
Thank you. Yes, so the Kanakabar membership is 250 people. Of that, 40 live on reserve, but we have 90 people living here. We have inclusive housing, so if you want to live at Kanakabar and we have a vacancy, you're welcome to move here. For the membership off reserve, obviously they were living in Lytton, and I say were because of its past tense at the moment. But for the most part, many of Kanakabar's employables are in Kamloops and or Chilliwack and paying rent at market rent rates down in that area. So if you're looking at a percentage, what's 40 of 200? 20%. So 20% of my residents are here, and then by October we'll be creating accommodation for another 180 people for those people who wish to move home.
Yes, thank you very much, and obviously we're all very sorry about what's happened in Lytton, and it's kind of frustrating how long it has been taking. I know that Brad Viss has been really advocating. So going now to with Celeste, Ms. Celeste Hayward, just the housing mix, the different projects. It's very impressive, all the different projects that you have going. How does that work? Do you have to be Indigenous to be able to own, or not to own, to rent one of the projects, or is there a mix? And then myself, I'm a member of Métis Nation BC. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about Métis Nation BC and just any housing projects that they're involved in.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think that the majority of the housing providers across the Indigenous housing providers off reserve, there is no discrimination against the tenant. If there's space and a tenant meets the criteria, and the criteria doesn't mean that you have to be Indigenous, the space will be taken or given, I suppose is a better way to say that. The organizations themselves are Indigenous run and have an Indigenous board of directors. And of course, priority is to the Indigenous community, but we don't discriminate. As far as MNBC goes, we're partnered with MNBC. We meet with them regularly, especially their Ministry of Housing, and the senior director there. And we actually do administer funds to a number of Métis organizations across British Columbia to ensure housing is equally be part of the Métis solution for housing for Métis communities as well.
Seed by time.
Madame Martinez-Soretta pour 6 minutes.
Oui, merci. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today and for their presentations, especially the idea of responding to the most vulnerable, especially women who find themselves in the statistics. I'd like to ask a question to Madame Silva. And as you know, the Accelerator Fund is dedicated to municipalities. So I would like, especially Madame Silva, you spoke about the Aboriginals and Northern Affairs, that there was a lack of work for Indigenous people living in cities. And densification can be an answer. But I'd like to hear both of you as to how a fund that is working with municipalities will be able to help attain these objectives, knowing that there's zoning issues and regulations when you're in municipalities. So how can this fund help you to reach your objectives, which is especially to help the most vulnerable women? Madame Witzman and then Madame Silva after that. Thank you, Madame Farrar. I will be speaking English.
Ways that through working with municipalities, the needs of Indigenous women can be respected and met. The first is having set-asides. For instance, the City of Toronto has 20% of its affordable housing will be developed by Mizuibec, which is an Indigenous organization that work with urban Indigenous people in Toronto. The second is by treating, for instance, with the Squamish Nation, them as a municipal government. For instance, the Squamish Nation right now is doing one of the most outstanding and interesting projects in Canada, the Seneca development, which when built out should have 7,000 rental units in Vancouver. So there can be direct negotiation, I would think. I mean, I'm not Indigenous, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, with Indigenous nations that have land through treaty. Obviously, it's up to the federal government to create treaties. For instance, I live in Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and it would be great if there was a suitably sized piece of land that could be negotiated, and I know there's ongoing negotiations. But I don't, perhaps I misunderstood the question, but I think I did misunderstand the question. I can tell by you nodding. But I think it's possible to have sub-targets and do negotiations.
Merci, Madame Witzman. Madame Silva?
Thank you, Madame Witzman. Madame Silva.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to have this funding also for First Nations on reserve, and it can be a little bit frustrating how sometimes the fund looks at differently, on reserve and off reserve, because we have a traditional territory, we are an unceded First Nation, so it would be great to be able to get access to this fund within our traditional territory. I think there's opportunities to partner with different First Nations and different Indigenous nonprofits as well to be able to provide housing for women in our vulnerable community members and future affordable housing projects as well. So I think we need to kind of get rid of that on reserve, off reserve way of thinking. Municipalities can also support First Nations with the development of, infrastructure, but also servicing. So municipal services agreements are needed for most of the Squamish Nation's reserves. We just signed one for the City of Vancouver, but we do require ones with all of our other municipalities. So those municipal service agreements give us access to water and utilities and all sorts of stuff. And so those are a lot of those need to be actually done to be able to do the housing that we need to be able to bring everybody home within the next generation. And those are really can be long, really long agreements and take a really long time. And it would be great to see those municipalities make those municipal service agreements a priority.
Merci, Madame Silva.
Thank you very much, Madame Silva. I would also like to ask the witnesses if they have recommendations, if they could file those documents, and maybe specifically with respect to municipalities, how can we use this fund to help you within your municipalities? I just have 30 seconds. Mr. Gladstone, this is something that is important to me. I myself have lived in, I had a son with disabilities who had autism, so I had to use this. So how can municipalities help to respond to this need for people with disabilities? You only have a few seconds. I'm so sorry.
Thank you very much. The answer is 10%. The answer is, in order for municipalities to be able to access any funds within, that they must, similar to the National Housing Strategy, allocate funds and units to those with developmental disabilities, and the suggestion based on the need in Ontario was 10%. So, Madame, that would be the answer, 10%.
See, Madame Martinez.
Thank you, Madame Martinez. Madame Chabot. You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today in person and virtually. It's a pleasure to hear you. The study that we're doing now at HUMA, it's to develop options with respect to the design of 100,000 new housing units before 2024 and 2025. So within that, there's nothing in terms of percentages for people, whether they're women, peoples with disability, or Indigenous. It's for 100,000 new units, and that's $4 billion over 5 years. So with everything that we're hearing in terms of the need for rental housing, I think that we're really far from being able to respond to this need. And I think the national housing strategy, I think we're at one point, we have a huge deficit that needs to be taken care of. So I would have a question for Madame Kurdi. You said in your testimony that we need to have housing units from the start that would be 100% adapted for people with disabilities. So you're saying it has to be done right off the bat rather than waiting. And you said we shouldn't be repeating the past errors that we've made. So what are those past errors that we shouldn't repeat, Madame Leah Kurdi?
Thank you very much. And this is a great question. I've been working in this industry for over 21 years, and I do all different types of projects, but my passion projects are accessible playgrounds and housing. Unfortunately, we see a lot of really avoidable mistakes. When the funding formulas being too complex, and I mentioned in my my witness statement that the way we teach design education is as big a part of the problems that we're experiencing, rather than not knowing what to do. It's the way we think about accessibility as being something that's an othering. It's, disabled people need that, not me. If you think of how different you were 20 years ago and how likely different you're going to be in 20 years, then the concept of who are we designing for, and that everybody changes, is really fundamentally important. So some of the mistakes we have seen in the current design strategies and the current funding models is operationally, if you only require certain units or a percentage of units to be accessible, most of those accessibility requirements, one, are for wheelchair users, which is only a small percentage of all of the different types of disabilities we have. And two, what requirements they do include for wheelchair users actually don't create usable spaces. So some of the mistakes we see, for example, if it says an accessible path of travel must be provided from, to the front door, and then from the front door to the washroom or to a bedroom or to the kitchen, that the design industry doesn't know a path of travel needs to include a turning space for an assistive piece of equipment. The building code, the size and space of the turn circle is not evidence-based sizing. It's in a negotiated settlements. Designable Environments worked with, I think it was the National Research Council several years ago, doing a study about what was missing from the National Building Code. And this again goes to what are some of the mistakes we're making, is that we fundamentally design for non-disabled people versus thinking 100% of us are going to get disabilities at some point. So we found in that study that there were, in that gap analysis.
Thank you, Madame Kurdi. I'm sorry to stop you. If you have any documentation that you would like to send us on the subject, that would be very much appreciated. My other question is for Mr. Gladstone. You spoke about a 10%. So I understand that if we were to put a percentage, for people that had developmental disabilities, it would be 10%. But you also talk about cost, and that it was very rare to be able to help people purchasing. Can you tell us a little more? So you feel that there has to be the ability for disabled people. They have to be able to build for people who have intellectual troubles, deficiencies.
Thank you. So currently in Ontario, at least 16,000 individuals with developmental disabilities are awaiting appropriate housing. And 90% of those with intellectual and developmental disabilities are on ODSP, and they can only have a maximum $497 in rent. And the only way that those rent calculations can make any sense is with the support of government. RENA is in the process of building our newest intentional community residence, the Frankfurt Family RENA Residence in Toronto, those of you familiar near the Allen Expressway in Eglinton. It's a 19-story building that will house 160 individuals of diverse needs. The total projected budget is $75 million. And in order to make the units affordable, we're looking about $20 million to come from various governments and an extra $5.5 million that we've already gotten from City of Toronto waivers. And as well as that, CMHC with their low mortgage rates makes it affordable and allows us to get down to those numbers. And to the point that the previous witness made vis-a-vis accessibility and mistakes made, there are also very strangenesses in the building codes throughout the municipalities. Obviously not an issue here, but I will tell you one of the reasons that RENA builds our own is because we know what the individuals we support need in terms of their support that no one else can build to those standards. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gladstone and Madame Chabot. Madame Zarillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank all of the witnesses that came to speak to us today. I wanted to speak a little bit about the human rights lens that was mentioned by a number of witnesses today. The Housing Accelerator Fund has a framing of market development to get 100,000 units of housing going. So I guess I would start with Ms. Curdy. If I could ask Ms. Curdy, this idea that the human rights lens, like some of the commitments that were made in the National Housing Strategy and even in the Accessibility Acts that Canada has commitments to, what is the missing link? What is it that's not being upheld for human rights in relation to housing?
Thank you. This is a great question as well. I think I've always been confused. How do we define who is a person in this country? And under the Canadian Charter, we say people with disabilities are equal citizens. And yet our national building code fails to create, or even exempts in many cases, that housing even has to be accessible. That doesn't seem to align for me, especially as the Human Rights Code specifically, and I'm paraphrasing, says that buildings and spaces shall not discriminate against people with disabilities. And then as mentioned before, any one of us, I mean, if we want to talk about intersectionality with any of the groups represented here today and any of the conversations we've had, disability is the only thing that doesn't discriminate against everybody. So 100% of us are going to need to have accessible housing. And even more than that, if you're going to live in a community and not be isolated, you need to be able to have people visit you in your home, but also be able to visit others in their home. So the idea of visitable design is creating a level entry entrance into a home, access to a bathroom with a transfer space and turn circle. We look at the space impacts, we look at the cost impacts. Most of what we need when we teach designers well how to do this, it doesn't cost a lot more. It's not hard to do. It's not rocket science. It just is a different way of thinking. And from a human rights perspective, I think that just makes more holistic sense, reduces the impact on pressure for long-term care. It reduces the impact on healthcare. There's so many benefits, and it fundamentally doesn't discriminate against any one of us at any time in our lives. I hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you so much. And my last question is for Ms. Witzman. The Minister of Housing was in recently and said that we are investing in the development of more inclusive and accessible communities through the National Housing Strategy. The Affordable Housing Innovation Fund is encouraging projects, and it says that they will not get a cent. No development will get a cent if it's not meeting these accessibility guidelines of the National Housing Strategy. So you mentioned that 33% of housing should be for diversity in the National Housing Strategy, and that again, these human rights are not being upheld. So I wonder if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, how this Housing Accelerator Fund can meet those numbers, and how it needs to, how the National Housing Strategy is potentially failing us right now in that area.
Thank you, MP Zurillo. I didn't say 33% of funding. The federal government said 33% of funding,
right.
And it's in CMHC
yeah.
documents. And frankly, I'm not quite sure where that 33% comes from, given that women-led households are 40% of households, and they're twice as likely as male-led households to be in housing needs. So I don't actually know where that number comes from, but I think my colleague Mr. Gladstone was talking about sub-targets. Sub-targets are really important in the agreements, but then it's also really important that the federal government signal its housing right intentions, which include targeting those in greatest housing need and using maximum available resources. And that can happen not just through funding, but through release of government land, because we know that land is 15 to 30% of cost, depending on where it is in a city. Nonprofit development, by the way, can knock off another 20%, so I'm not quite sure why it needs to be private development. And scale matters immensely. So in the 70s, the federal government supported Falls Creek South and Vancouver, St. Lawrence neighborhood in Toronto. Those were large-scale developments that were 2/3 nonprofit housing and continue to provide affordable housing for thousands of people. Those are the kinds of bang for the buck developments that should be promoted through the Housing Accelerator Fund and can help promote human rights, particularly if there are sub-targets within them that focus on particularly vulnerable groups. And we've been hearing today about people with physical and intellectual disabilities, women, Indigenous people. We all have multiple identities, so we all have. It's not like it's 33% for women-led households and in 20%, let's say, for Indigenous households and 10% for intellectual disabilities. People have intersectional identities, and you can kind of tick off a couple of boxes at the same time. But those are the kinds of expectations the federal government should have in working with municipalities and should support through layering its funding programs in order to have genuinely affordable housing.
I think my time is up, Mr. Chair.
No, you have 20 seconds.
Okay, I'll pass. Thank you.
We'll get you. Okay, thank you, Madame Zurillo. Now to Mr. Leipert for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I wanted to get a bit of better understanding of on-reserve, off-reserve challenges. I'm going to start with Ms. Hayward. You mentioned a number of 7,000 units being built. Is that on reserve, off reserve, or a combination of two? And is that in the last, I think you said in the last year. So could you just clarify that for me, please?
Sure. We have all of our housing units are off reserve, and that's 2,100 are being built in the next 2 years, and 5,500 are already built and are servicing Indigenous people right now.
Okay, so these are all off reserve housing you're talking about.
For the majority, I think there's one or two projects that have partnerships on reserve as well, but that's all off reserve.
Okay, so one of the things that we consistently hear is that one of the barriers or hurdles tends so often to be municipal guidelines, municipal regulations, those sorts of things. Is that something that you as a advocate on behalf of Indigenous housing, is that something you want to talk about a bit? Is it a problem as well?
Yeah, yes, thank you for the opportunity. Absolutely. The majority of the municipalities across British Columbia don't even mention or have Indigenous priority within their housing strategies or plans. We did a study, I believe, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago that identified that. So one of our big our asks for this Housing Accelerator Fund is to ensure municipalities engage with Indigenous communities for builds and allow for that culturally supported housing and cultural safety to be part of what they're doing in these municipalities for housing. There's another. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to say that all across British Columbia, many municipalities have Indigenous-run organized housing organization or housing service providers within their catchment areas.
I guess consultation is one thing, but to have a recognize Indigenous housing. But I'm thinking more of things like zoning and those sorts of things. In your efforts over the past few years, are there a couple of specific things that you constantly run across that just don't seem to be necessary at the municipal level? Would you care to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. In our current, we're currently looking at developing some Indigenous complex care, which is intensive supportive housing in British Columbia, and we're running into zoning issues in these developments. They're not new developments, they're the builds with renovations, and the concern we're facing is they're not allowing us to, well, in some communities, you can only have 6 units, can't go over that because then that's too many in the community for this complex care needs. And the reality is the people who would be using complex care are already in the community. They're just street entrenched or living in the shelter. So why is zoning getting in the way of creating really solid opportunities for Indigenous people to access support, attachment, the full realm of services and become part of have a stable life? And we definitely have over the years faced that problem, especially around NIMBYism. I'm sorry, I'm not a specialist on zoning, but we're facing it definitely in complex care.
But it's the kind of thing that I think we hear about consistently. And one of the concerns I have with programs like the Accelerator Fund is appropriate measurements of success. Have you given any thought to what the federal government could sort of implement into the the regulations within the legislation or the program to ensure that some of these things are cleared out of the way? Is measurement important to you? Measurement of success important?
Of course. I think one thing that would be really useful is if the concepts of cultural safety, which HUMA is developing cultural safety in housing, because it has definitely been defined in health. But if municipalities actually applied cultural safety into reviewing their housing strategies and how they're working with Indigenous people, I think that we could, sort of reduce the amount of stigma and discrimination, racism that just exists within the city itself, or the towns, et cetera, and maybe change some of the experiences of Indigenous housing providers and housing service providers looking to establish affordable housing and low-income housing.
And clarify for me, is there anything in this Accelerator Fund program that would be applicable to on-reserve?
I'm not the person to talk about on-reserve housing. Okay. I don't do on-reserve.
I guess if there's another one of our guests or witnesses that would care to elaborate on that, because it would seem to me that there shouldn't be the same kinds of barriers if it's on-reserve housing that's being applied for. Is there anyone want to make any comment on that?
Madame Silva?
Sure, I could try to answer that question. It is a bit frustrating having a lot of the housing funding define on reserve and off reserve. The province of BC is the first province to fund housing on reserve and not look at those lines anymore. And it's made a huge impact in our province and in our community. Really, we stood up to create HUMA housing and do all of these initiatives because we got access to more funding from BC Housing. And so, it'd be great for, for the federal government and CMHC to start considering allowing these funds for on reserve as well, because we do have our own, our own barriers to development on reserve as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Over now to Mr. Van Bynen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be directing most of my questions to Mr. Gladstone, but before I do, I was keenly interested in the project that was outlined by Chief Patrick Mitchell with the Kanakabar Indian Band, and I was wondering, is there a project overview or outline that that talks about the project that could be sent to this committee? We'd like to hear about success projects and how they might be reflected in the funding. So, are you able to make that information available to us?
Absolutely, yes. I've done a bit of an outline of videos as well as materials, and we did do a video for May 27th. I'll be happy to send an outline of videos and PowerPoints and send that on to the committee as well, as who can forward off to the participants.
It's replicable, and maybe that could be utilized as some of the framework. Mr. Gladstone, in the Budget 2022, the government explained that the Housing Accelerators funds would be focusing on increasing supply with the creation of 100,000 new net housing units over the next 5 years, but that the government supports would be targeted to ensure a balanced supply that includes a needed increase to the supply of affordable housing. Now, in your opinion, how should the government define affordable housing in the context of the new fund? And should it be housing that is targeted with moderate income, lower than market income, low income families, and now you've used a term which is deeply affordable housing, and how would we be able to define those?
Thank you very much. Well, there is a core housing need in the low-income sphere at 80% of the market rate, which is what CMHC refers to as affordable. But it goes even further than that, and my term of deeply affordable refers to the amount that ODSP permits for rent, and just speaking to Ontario, but other provinces are similar, is $497 per month per person. So if we don't intentionally build to that with appropriate targets in place, it won't be built. So I would suggest to you that 10%, or in this case of the 100,000 units being built, the 10,000 would be at the deeply affordable rate, at the ODSP rate, to allow those in largest need access, which would include the vast majority of those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, 90% of which live within below the poverty line.
Okay, thank you. Now, you mentioned 10%, and I'm curious, would you see that as 10% being a specific carve-out of the fund to fund units or projects that are deeply affordable, or would you see that as requiring 10% of every project that is financed to have deeply affordable components within those projects?
The ideal scenario is mixed rent, mixed developments, but that's not always going to happen. So I would say the overall would be 10% of all funds must be to that group, which is essentially what we have asked the province of Ontario to speak to their municipalities, and with a nudge from the federal government would go a long way, not only Ontario, but across the country. And that's the only way that it will happen.
Is there a risk of a project like that being stigmatized, and how would you overcome that?
Well, the intentional community consortium or residences that RENA operates, they are in communities. They, the individual units are rented by the tenants themselves. They have complete access to everything. And it's where they, the individuals we support, wish to live. But it's also important to note that choice is vital. So with the funds, with more buildings happening, people can choose to live much as a so-called typical individual. Some wish to live in apartments, some wish to live in seniors' apartments, some wish to live by themselves, some with roommates. The same should be available. So happens that RENA has built now the RENA community residence and the Lou Fruitman residence in Vaughan, and now we're building the Frankfurt family residence in Toronto, because the need is so great, and people want to live where they will be appropriately supported with friends, with others that will look after them the best way possible. And we have found zero stigmatization whatsoever in our current places. At one point, there was some NIMBYism, but Rena, from the get-go, meets with others in the community, explains who, what, where, how, and as soon as people are aware of the individuals moving in, open up their doors even more.
Okay, thank you. What barriers do non-profit and for-profit housing developers face in creating accessible housing?
The biggest one would be funding, particularly from the nonprofit side of things, and the availability of funds to bring it down to the deeply affordable, which most of the individuals they would support are there. Zoning is another big one. I can speak to Ontario zoning in particular and the extended Greater Toronto Area, where if more than 3 individuals are living that use a wheelchair or mobility challenged, need to have a special type of zoning, B3, which increases the pricing tremendously. So in an apartment building, if 3 individuals wish to live by themselves with no support from an agency, you could have everyone in the buildings by themselves with no supports in a wheelchair. The minute an agency supports them more than 3, then more building code standards are required. Safety is essential, and one of the reasons why RENA builds its own buildings are because of the accessibility features as well as the safety features. We can build them better than the developers, and developers come to us and say in no uncertain terms, you're doing it the right way. They just can't.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Van Buinen. We're well over. Madame Chabot, pour 2 minutes et demi.
Madame Chabot, you have 2.5 minutes. Yes, I have a question that will be for Madame Silva and afterwards to Madame Witzman. Certain witnesses have told us that the definition of affordability that is in the national housing strategy should be reevaluated, re-examined, and we have to define it and have it to be the same in this definition, the same in all programs. So, Madame Silva and afterwards, Madame Witzman, do you have an idea about this question? Anything to say about this question of affordability and the definition?
Yeah, for Indigenous communities, and exactly, our affordability is often defined by outsiders, and oftentimes it does not meet the income in our community, so it creates a really great a huge housing barrier outside of the reserve. And so I know each First Nations is different and their needs are different, and so it would be great for when developing housing for First Nations people to be able to reach out to them, because a lot of them are now working on their own housing strategies. They've done their need and the demand, so they understand what the income levels and the needs are, to engage with the different First Nations and ask them exactly, what it is, what is affordable based on their community, and to be able to have that then developed into the current programs and then the future housing developments as well.
Merci, Madame Witzman.
Thank you. Madame Witzman.
Straightforward and simple. For many years, for many decades, the CMHC had a definition of affordability that it stuck to, which was, well, first it was 20 and then 25 and then 30%, but since the 80s, the definition of affordable housing has been 30% of before tax income. I'm part of a project, the Housing Assessment Resource Tools Project, that's based at UBC. We have done analysis for every city, region, province, territory, the country as a whole of housing need. And there's 3 categories, and the city of Vancouver, for instance, uses this analysis. We're working with 14 different municipalities across Canada to integrate this analysis. There's very low-income people. That's a lot of the people we've been hearing about today. Their incomes are less than 20% of the median income, usually on OSDP or Ontario Works or whatever the equivalent is in other provinces. Then there's low-income people, generally dependent on minimum wage, generally earning like less, between 15 and 30,000 a year, can afford maybe $750 a month. And then there's moderate income households who sometimes are in housing need, particularly if they're larger families. There you're talking about, it depends on the city, about $1,085 a month in rent. Those are the households who are in housing need. Those are the households that the National Housing Strategy is committed to focus on. That's what human rights obligations say you should be focusing on. So the definition of affordability is not the most complicated problem you're going to be dealing with.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madame Chabot. Madame Cirillo.
Thank you. And my question is for Mr. Gladstone around the information about the National Housing Strategy promising 2,400 units and 700 being built. So we've talked a lot today about the National Housing Strategy and some of those definitions that we've been told by the government are going to be ported over to the Housing Affordability Fund. So I wonder, Mr. Gladstone, if you would just share some of the reasons why you think the targets of 2,400 have not been able to be met over the years.
Very much. I would suggest that Rome wasn't built in a day, and since the National Housing Strategy came out, significant efforts have been made and more housing is being built. However, it has mostly come from not-for-profits, and the for-profit municipalities have not always been as assisted as we would have liked. But through, for instance, the Intentional Community Consortium, with RENA as the lead agency, a number of our member agencies are now building. It takes probably 2 to 3 years from the beginning of the thought of we need to build, we need to be doing something until it comes to fruition. And I would say that considerably more units are in process but are not occupied yet. So that's why it's only at the 700.
Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Ms. Witzman, I'm sorry if it's Witzman or Weitzman. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. I wanted to just ask you something around, modifying funding for CMHC. We've heard a little bit of testimony here that there needs to be some changes at CMHC in the way they fund. I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on how CMHC could help support these core needs faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a certain amount of evaluation of the co-investment fund and certainly the rental construction finance initiative that shows the outcomes in terms of people meeting the needs of people in core housing need are pretty close to zero. Rapid Housing Initiative is a slightly different story, but that wasn't in the original National Housing Strategy and is sort of getting year-by-year funding, but that's really the only program that is meeting the needs of people in core housing needs. So there needs to be a revision of the co-investment fund and the rental construction finance initiative in order to steer it towards genuinely affordable outcomes. And really, the CMHC needs to do a slightly better job of reporting annually on its outcomes in relation to the stated goals of the National Housing Strategy, which are 530,000 households lifting it out of housing need. The other thing that I'd say is that a lot of the money is going into demand-side initiatives, such as the Canada Housing Benefit, and for instance, the province of Quebec tends to layer its demand side, its housing benefits on top of other programs in order to reach the rents that are affordable. So kudos to the province of Quebec as far as I'm concerned. If you can layer some of these programs on top of one another, lease government land, and look at questions of scale, you can get the rents to where they need to be.
Thank you. And if I've got a few more, if I've got another, I'm out.
You've gone well.
I'll take back my 20 seconds from last time.
But just hold it. We may get you to wrap up, Madame Cirillo. Mr. Muse, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your expertise and the specific recommendations and comments that you've made. I think that's added a lot of insight to the discussion. Recognizing that the bells are going to ring, Mr. Chair, and that our time may be cut a little bit short, I just want to say up front, I'm going to ask a question, but then I'm going to pass to my colleague, Ms. Goodrich, so that she has a chance to ask a question before the time dwindles. So I guess my question is to Mr. Gladstone and Ms. Witzman, although I invite any others to chime in. And that is, we know that there are labor shortages in Canada, particularly in the construction sector, and we've heard that at this committee. And it's certainly exacerbated by supply chain disruptions. And so are you concerned about the ability of the housing accelerator to meet its goal of 100,000 by 2024-25, given the shortages in labor to construct units? And if so, what strategies or considerations might you offer as recommendations to the federal government as they consider that and making sure we reach this important goal?
Well, thank you very much. And if I could also take this opportunity to MP Zerillo to indicate your prior question why they haven't been built, because not all municipalities feel that it's important, and with the federal government's assistance, it becomes important. MP Muse, my apologies, but thank you. RENA just completed the Lou Fruitman RENA residence during COVID, when there were the hardest times during construction, et cetera. And we completed it on time, actually early, and on budget. And that is because the contractors we worked with knew the need was there and were able to assist us. So in terms of what I can suggest, nonprofits working within their community are able to build cheaper, and when they are knowledgeable, better and faster, and that is certainly the way. Also, individuals that we support with intellectual and developmental disabilities are always looking for jobs. RENA has a tremendous job training program, and we would be delighted to work with more and more trades to allow them to assist as well. So when there's a will, there's a way. The need is so great, we will make it happen. It takes a village to raise a child, as we all know. It takes more than one village to raise those with developmental disabilities, and people understand that they're not building typical condos, that there's a reason why they're building what they are, and they come in to help big time. Thank you.
I share your concern around 100,000 homes in 3 to 4 years. I think that some of the ways that can be improved is through designating large chunks of land, including federal land, that can be developed, encouraging municipalities to do as the city of Victoria recently did, and that is pre-zone as of right housing for nonprofits, that is getting rid of the sort of NIMBY third-party rights stuff. I have lots and lots of opinions about changing zoning rules, but those can't be expressed within 4 to 5 minutes.
And perhaps you can document some.
I'm happy to document it.
Well.
I mean, the last thing I'd say is that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has been pretty clear that they want an acquisitions fund as part of HAF, and I think that might want to be considered.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the witnesses. My question is going to be directed to Chief Mitchell. You talked about the resilience in the housing that you're building, and I'm just wondering if the Housing Accelerator Fund gives any space towards that, and further, if there's anything that you think the Housing Accelerator Fund could do better to address this need, because being the MP from Fort McMurray Cold Lake, I think it's pretty evident that we definitely need to be prepared for some of these climate and weird weather spaces that we are in.
Thank you.
Chief Mitchell, just before you respond, I need to get unanimous consent for the committee to continue. There's been a 30-minute bell called, and if the committee agrees, we would adjourn at 10 to 1. That would give members enough time to go to the House, and then we could get through the rounds of questions we have. Do we have
If I may suggest a friendly amendment of 1:45, just so that we've got sufficient time.
Well, it's the wish of the committee. Does the committee wish to adjourn at 1:45? Okay. Then, continue. Then we'll continue to 12:45. Chief Mitchell, continue.
Thank you for the question. Well, the big challenge for Kanaka Bar is that nobody's heard of the products we're using. Gosh forbid you find a product that's 40% cheaper than anything else in the market that's fireproof, soundproof, windproof, rodent-proof, microproof. One of the things is no matter who you are, you should really look at the products. They're cementitious in nature. And they can be built. If you look at, they've been used internationally across the world. We're just really slow bringing them into Canada. And so when I reference the one product, for Thea, if she's in the design, she should know what AAC is. And if she doesn't, that's the problem with AAC. It's used in Australia, California, Mexico, Siberia. It's the highest rated product in the world in terms of wind resistance and I think it was earthquake resistance. So when you look at something like the housing adaptation strategy or national housing strategy, they don't like new. All I'm saying is I want Sarah's projects. Just put them on a different place where they're wanted. I want what everybody was talking about here. Don't get hung up on new design. Just steal what's working and build it. Otherwise, the 100,000 is not going to work. It's simply not going to work because it's an excuse. NIMBY is an excuse. Zoning is an excuse. Archaeological is an excuse. Historical values. UNDRIP is an excuse. 600 plus bands are there waiting to put inclusive housing up. Why won't people step to that table surrounded by municipalities? You've got funding that's available to municipalities. How come the municipalities aren't speaking to me? I'm always asking the municipality, but do they want affordable housing? Because we lost an entire town that's strategically located. And by the way it looks here is that they could put affordable housing up. I have a meeting with 8 chiefs, the municipality and the regional district on the 16th saying we're all in. We don't have any money. But if it takes 5 or 6 years to get an approval, then we're not going to hit the 2024 target numbers. But all I've said is, if you have products that are inexpensive, that create the jobs for British Columbians, Canadians, and that can be replicated, it'll work.
Thank you, Chief Mitchell, and thank you, Ms. Goodrich. We'll now, we'll end with Mr. Collins for 5 minutes. That will respect the timeline the committee adopted. Mr. Collins, you have the last 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for all the witnesses for their appearance today. My first question is to Ms. Hayward around the culturally supportive housing that she referenced in her opening. What would investments look like from the fund as it relates to supporting culturally supportive housing?
Thank you for the opportunity. Culturally supported housing is essentially housing that requires acknowledgement of Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultural needs and accessibility within the housing. So that starts with design, how it's put together, how the space is created, what's available in the space, how do people access each other, how do people create community, all the way to the way that we interact with the tenants, the services that are provided to the tenants to ensure that there's a connection to create the opportunity for home and that sense of belonging, which I think is really important parts of Indigenous ways of knowing across the spectrum of whatever way that is. So for me, culturally supported housing is Indigenous-led, Indigenous-owned, and Indigenous culture present in every brick, wood, carpet, and space, and for Indigenous people with diverse needs and Indigenous people who need a place to live. That's what culturally supported housing is.
Thanks, Ms. Hayward. I appreciate that. To Chief Michelle, you were the only one today that referenced the urban-rural divide, and I didn't completely catch the comment in your opening in terms of the difference and maybe how those two are separated from an investment standpoint. So could you elaborate on that rural issue that you spoke to in your opening comment? I'm sorry I missed it when you referenced it.
Certainly, located in rural BC, I love living out here. But I can't help but see that everybody wants affordable housing in urban BC, urban Canada. Well, here's rural. We don't have NIMBY as the issue. I want Sarah and Celeste and other people to move here. But if I don't get housing, they're not going to move here. So rural BC, in many situations, given transportation and virtual, you can live comfortably in rural BC, in rural Canada. That's where your affordability can be manifest. Don't hide behind, oh, you're farther away from suppliers and supplies. That's an excuse. So I'm just saying is that rural Canada is available for affordable housing if Canadians would be prepared to move to rural Canada. And that's why I say our door is open here.
Thanks, Chief. And can you elaborate then on what kind of unique supports rural would need over what we typically hear from our urban witnesses?
Internet, cell service. The biggest challenge in rural BC, of course, would probably in waste management in terms of the gray and wastewater that's produced. You'd have to come up with a very good septic system for the larger models. Because most of our homes are fourplexes, you could go densification, but we'd need to have a lot of work in terms of the waste. Just what do we do with the gray water?
Thank you for that. Mr. Gladstone, can I ask about the project you're working on in the City of Toronto? And you've referenced a number of others that have already been constructed. You talked about the scarcity of land. So for the federal government, Ms. Chabot reminded us that it's a $4 billion fund over 5 years, and the goal is 100,000 new units. For me, I'm interested in getting at the affordability issue that a number of other witnesses have talked about. But of course, there's that whole issue of creating 100,000 units. And so the per door cost is very important as we look at the math, just in terms of how we spread this out over a number of years. What's the best way to go about reducing the per door cost, whether it's contribution of land, some of the fee waivers that you've received from the municipality? Do you have a list of investments that you could provide to the committee where we might look at investing the $4 billion to reduce the per door cost?
Absolutely. So the first comment that I would make is we're not looking at government for everything. The community must participate as well from local fundraising efforts. So in terms of our new build, I just happen to have the numbers handy of the $75 million budget. As it turns out, it's being built on lands of existing group homes that we had, so we didn't have to repurchase, but it was about $3 million to get the land ready, and we purchased a new unit to go with our existing. We're hopeful for about $17.5 million from government grants from the provincial and federal government. $5.2 million the City of Toronto through their Door Open program has already granted us. We will be raising $15 million ourselves. The Frankfurt family very generously started us out with a $6 million gift, and then CMHC ultra-low mortgage rates at $34.5 million is how we'll finance. So through the waiver of development fees and charges is paramount. I see my time is up. Thank you.
And thank you, committee members. And Chief Mitchell, as a rural member of Parliament, I really appreciated your last comments, Chief, about the uniqueness of, we cannot overlook rural small-town Canada on this particular study, and I appreciate my colleague raising that. So thank you again to all the witnesses for appearing today. And just before we close, a reminder to committee members of Thursday, the decisions you took at the last meeting is to come prepared for recommendations that will be forwarded to the minister on this very important study. And if they could be done in both official language, it will make it easier to deal with, because if we do not get them dealt with on Thursday, we may miss getting them there. So Thursday is an important meeting for your recommendations. You have a lot of information before you. So again, thank you, witnesses, for taking the time to give such compelling testimony to this committee. And to committee members, thank you. Meeting adjourned. Pardon?